Right now, as you listen to these words, there is a version of you existing in a parallel reality who has already crossed the threshold into the life you imagine for yourself. That self isn't waiting, hoping, or rehearsing possibility. They are already living it. And what if I told you that this is not a poetic metaphor, not wishful thinking, but a truth embedded in the very structure of consciousness? Across dimensions, this future self is not silent. They reach back like a hand extended through fog, sending you signals that take the form of synchronicities. A book fallen open at the precise page, a conversation overheard that lands like prophecy, or this very transmission arriving in your awareness at what seems like the perfect moment. Most dismiss such moments as chance, but those who pause, who dare to lean closer, discover that coincidence is a word we invented to disguise our awe. What you are experiencing is not randomness, it is quantum communication. Consciousness, contrary to what you were taught in school, does not flow along the neat tracks of past, present, and future. Your deeper awareness exists in what some physicists have dared to call the eternal now, a realm in which all possibilities exist at once, waiting for recognition. Imagine the threads of a great tapestry woven outside of time, where every choice you could make, every version of you that could unfold, already glimmers like a star in the weave. Your awareness, your intuition, has the ability to brush against those threads, sensing the texture of realities not yet visible to your waking eyes. Think for a moment about those sudden, undeniable pulses of recognition. The gut feeling that a decision is destined. The inexplicable sense that you've been here before. The shiver down your spine when someone speaks a truth you already knew but had forgotten. In ancient cultures, these were not dismissed as quirks of the nervous system. They were revered as messages from gods, ancestors, or oracles. The Greeks flocked to Delphi to receive cryptic prophecies because they understood the future could whisper into the present. Indigenous traditions across the world honored dream states as portals where time bent, where guidance from both past and future selves could be received. Today, we dress these same mysteries in scientific language, calling them quantum coherence or parallel timelines. But whether clothed in ritual or physics, the essence is unchanged. Your future self is speaking. They are not sending words, but frequencies, not instructions, but invitations. Each synchronicity is a breadcrumb leading you toward the path where your life becomes what it was always meant to be, and yet most people brush them away. They rationalize, explaining to themselves that it was merely luck, or that the algorithm put the right video in their feed. But algorithms do not write destiny. Algorithms cannot make the hair on your arms stand up with a sense of inevitability. What if, instead of dismissing the spark, you treated it as sacred? What if you understood that the quiet voice inside, the subtle nudge, is the compass of your becoming? Here lies the great secret. Your future self is not far away. They exist at the frequency of recognition. The moment you embody even a fragment of their energy, the gap begins to collapse. You shorten the distance between timelines, not by effort, but by resonance. This is why, in every mystical tradition, transformation is described less as a journey forward and more as a remembrance. You are not building a new self from scratch. You are aligning with the self that already exists, already thrives, already waits for you to awaken. Pause here. Notice the feeling that has risen in you as you consider this. It is not fantasy. It is the edge of contact. Just as sailors once guided their ships by distant lighthouses, you are steering by the glow of your own actualized being. This awareness, this flicker of possibility you feel right now, is the proof. Time, as we commonly understand it, is a line, We imagine ourselves moving forward, past behind us, future ahead, present as a single fleeting point. Yet when you strip away our human measurements, calendars, clocks, the beating of the heart, time reveals itself not as a line, but as a vast field, a dimension without edges. In this field, everything that will ever exist already exists, waiting in suspension. This is what modern quantum physicists gesture toward when they speak of the eternal now, a place where all possibilities unfold. Simultaneously, and awareness itself becomes the bridge between them. Consider Einstein, who wrote in a letter of condolence that for those who understand physics, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. Mystics across cultures whispered the same truth long before relativity was inked on paper. The Hindu sages of the Upanishads spoke of time as Maya, an appearance, not reality. Buddhist masters described awakening as stepping out of the flow of becoming and into the timeless stillness of what is. In Christian mysticism, eternity was not endless duration, but the presence of all things at once in the eye of God. Different languages, different metaphors, but always the same truth. Time is not what it seems. And if time is not linear, then neither are you. The you sitting here listening is only one expression among countless others, all of which breathe inside this eternal now. Your actualized self, the one who has crossed thresholds you still strain toward, is as present in this field as the child you once were. The boundary between them is porous. The whisper you feel in moments of intuition, the déjà vu, the flash of certainty, are fragments of this timeless you seeping into your current awareness. I remember sitting in meditation once, trapped in the familiar cage of my own limitations. The same thoughts circled endlessly, like ravens around a tower. I felt weary of myself, weary of the story I kept repeating. And then it came, not as thought, not as imagination, but as a knowing that seemed to arrive from the marrow itself. I felt the presence of a self who had already walked free of these walls. They radiated calm, a serenity that did not need to explain itself. They were not far. They were me, stripped of what was false. That moment changed everything. Transformation, I realized, is not about inventing a new identity as though sculpting clay from nothing. It is about remembering what is already present in the eternal now and choosing to inhabit it. Your future self is not a stranger waiting to be constructed. They are the deepest part of you, already alive, waiting to be claimed. The quantum field does not respond to desire. It responds to identity. It answers not to what you want, but to who you are being. If you continue to define yourself by your current limitations, then even your most fervent affirmations remain powerless because they are being broadcast on the wrong frequency. But when you begin to speak, move, and choose from the state of your remembered self, reality bends. It reorganizes itself around your coherence. This is why mystics, shamans, and sages across history insisted on ritual, embodiment, and practice. Words alone were never enough. They chanted, danced, fasted, endured vigils under the stars, because they knew the body must vibrate with the truth one seeks. The ancient initiations were not superstition. They were technologies for collapsing the gap between the self you believe yourself to be and the self that already exists in the eternal now. So the question is no longer, how do I become my future self? The truer question is, how do I remember them into being? The universe, mysterious and vast, does not respond to wishful thinking. It does not bend itself to your desires, no matter how sincerely they are whispered. What it responds to, what it has always responded to, is frequency. This is why your future self cannot be reached by longing or effort alone. They can only be contacted through alignment of identity. You do not pull them closer by saying, I want to be you. You collapse the distance by being them now. Think of it this way. A radio does not create the song. The music is already present, vibrating invisibly across the airwaves. The only question is whether the receiver is tuned to the correct frequency. In the same way, your future self, the one living in alignment, in wholeness, is already broadcasting. They hum at a frequency of certainty, coherence, and love. And every time you shift your thoughts, your emotions, and your choices into that same pattern, the static clears. The song comes through. This is why affirmations, for so many, feel hollow. You can repeat words endlessly. I am powerful. I am abundant. I am loved. But if you're speaking them from the frequency of fear, scarcity, or doubt, then the transmission cannot connect. The words fall flat because they are being sent from the wrong identity. Your future self does not need to be convinced of their worth. They embody it effortlessly, as naturally as breath. Ancient traditions understood this truth long before it was clothed in the language of quantum physics. Consider the vision quests of indigenous peoples, where one was not simply told they were becoming an adult, but had to live as though they already were. Alone in the wilderness, stripped of the familiar, they had no choice but to act as their highest self would act. In that crucible, the gap between current and future collapsed. The transformation did not come from desire, but from embodiment. Or think of the sacred rites of the Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece, where initiates drank from the kykeon and reenacted the death and rebirth of Persephone. These ceremonies were not symbolic play acting, they were identity reprogramming. For those who emerged, life no longer felt like something happening to them. They had touched eternity, and in doing so, they remembered their truer selves. Modern life offers subtler initiations, but the principle remains. Each time you ignore an intuitive nudge because fear tells you to stay small, you tune yourself to limitation. Each time you speak words of love when it would be easier to retreat into silence, you tune yourself to expansion. Frequency is not an abstract idea. It is the lived texture of your choices. And here lies the deepest challenge: contradiction. When your inner world is split, wanting one thing but believing it impossible, you create static in the channel. You may say, I want abundance, while every action is rooted in scarcity. You may affirm, I want love, while fearing vulnerability and hiding your true self. That static drowns out the transmission of your future self. The clearer your signal, the stronger the connection becomes. This is why coherence matters. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions align, you are no longer fractured. You are a clear, resonant instrument vibrating at the same pitch as your future self. And coherence always expresses itself through love, never fear. Fear contracts, clings, resists. Love expands, trusts, releases. Fear shrinks your field. Love amplifies it. Your future self operates entirely from love because love is the only frequency wide enough to carry their wisdom across time. Pause and ask yourself, where are you living in contradiction? Where are you saying yes with your words, but no with your energy? Where are you hiding behind fear when love is calling you forward? To step into coherence is to step into truth, and truth is the signature of the self you are becoming. Your future self remembers this moment. They remember the stirring you feel right now, the flicker of recognition that tells you these words are more than ideas. They are echoes from across time. Your future self remembers the day you chose. They recall it vividly, the decision to stop circling in doubt and to step onto the path of embodiment. And though you stand at the threshold now, they look back on this instant as the true turning point of your life. But here's the paradox. This moment is a crossroads, and crossroads always demand choice. Do you brush off the signal as coincidence, another fleeting burst of inspiration soon forgotten? Or do you treat it as sacred, the nudge you have been secretly asking for? Myth and history are rich with such moments. The Greeks told of Heracles at the crossroads, confronted by two women, one offering a life of ease and pleasure, the other a life of struggle and glory. His choice shaped the myths of a civilization. The Norse spoke of the Norns, weavers of fate, presenting threads of destiny that could never be rewoven once chosen. At every turning, cultures recognized that destiny hinges on moments of recognition. What makes these moments powerful is not the vision itself, but what follows. Signs are only half the equation. Embodiment is the other. Without action, the whisper fades. Your future self can flood your path with synchronicities, books falling open, chance meetings, sudden inspirations. But if you return unchanged to your old identity, the transmission is wasted. It is like receiving a map to treasure and refusing to leave your house. Embodiment does not require grand gestures. It begins with micro choices, quiet decisions that may seem small, but carry immense weight because of the energy behind them. When you wake tomorrow and ask, how would my actualized self move through this day? And then honor the answer, you collapse the distance between timelines. Perhaps it means speaking truth in a meeting instead of hiding in silence. Perhaps it means signing up for that course, calling that person, or simply offering yourself the compassion you have long withheld. Each choice becomes a declaration of identity. This is why gratitude is such a powerful accelerant. Not gratitude as a ritualist of what you already hold in your hands, but gratitude for what is already yours in the quantum field. Ancient cultures understood this well. The Egyptians offered prayers of thanks, not just for the Nile's floods, but for their continuance, as though they were already assured. The Lakota, in their sacred ceremonies, prayed as if what they sought had already come to pass, embodying the energy of fulfillment before any physical evidence appeared. Gratitude, then, is not passive appreciation. It is an act of timeline alignment. Your future self feels grateful, not hopeful. Hope is tinged with doubt. Gratitude is drenched in certainty. To generate that feeling now is to declare to the universe, I already am the person I am becoming. And when that declaration is repeated not in words alone, but in consistent, coherent choices, reality bends. Doors that seemed sealed begin to open. Opportunities that felt distant arrive unbidden. The field reorganizes itself around the signal you are transmitting. This moment, the one you are in right now, is not ordinary. It is a hinge in your story. History is shaped in such instants, though rarely recognized until later. And your future self remembers precisely how you answered the call. Receiving the message is only the beginning. Recognition without embodiment is like planting a seed and never watering it. Your future self may flood you with signs, whispers, and synchronicities, but unless you meet them halfway, unless you act from the energy they embody, the connection fades into background noise. This is why transformation so often stalls, not because the vision isn't real, but because it isn't integrated. Integration means allowing the truth of your future self to shape your choices here and now. It doesn't require burning down your life or making reckless leaps. More often, it begins with subtle shifts, micro decisions rooted in expansion instead of contraction. Choosing to speak your truth when silence feels safer. Trusting intuition over doubt. investing in growth rather than clinging to comfort. Every such act is a brushstroke, painting the portrait of your actualized self. Yet integration is rarely smooth. It often feels like disorientation, as though the ground itself is shifting. Ancient traditions name this phase the dark night of the soul. Alchemists called it the stage of dissolution, when the base matter of the old identity must be broken apart before gold can emerge. Mystics across cultures wrote of death and rebirth experiences, not of the body, but of the ego. To align with your future self requires shedding what cannot come with you. Old patterns, limiting beliefs, worn-out identities, they dissolve, and the process can feel like unraveling. But what if the unraveling is sacred? What if the moments you feel most lost are actually proof that the old self is dying, making space for the truth of who you are? This is the paradox your future self already understands. They remember the confusion, the moments of collapse, the fear that nothing would make sense again, and yet they now see those seasons as holy thresholds. Just as a caterpillar must dissolve in the chrysalis before becoming a butterfly, you too must undergo this sacred disintegration. Trust becomes your greatest ally here. Trust that every step, even those that seem sideways or backwards, is part of the architecture of your becoming. Trust that divine timing is not delay, but preparation. Think of the farmer who plants in spring and waits through summer. The absence of visible growth is not failure, it is gestation. Your future self knows this. They have already lived through the seasons of waiting and learned that patience is not passive. Patience is active faith. Integration also means surrendering the illusion of control. So much of your current struggle arises from gripping, forcing, pushing reality to move faster than it is ready to. Your future self, in contrast, flows. They act when guided, but release the outcome. They cooperate with the intelligence of life instead of wrestling against it. This surrender is not weakness. It is alignment with a power larger than yourself. The same power that spins galaxies and blossoms flowers. And in this surrender, gratitude transforms from practice into state of being. Every setback is no longer punishment, but recalibration. Every challenge becomes a teacher, sharpening the muscles of trust, deepening the well of wisdom. Your future self lives in constant gratitude because they see life as collaboration, not opposition. When you too begin to view obstacles as invitations rather than barriers, you start to embody the calm certainty of the one you are becoming. So here, at this turning point, you are asked to move beyond inspiration into integration, to stop collecting signs like seashells and begin walking the path they point to allow your life to be rewritten, not by force, but by coherence. This is the moment when the vision ceases to be a dream and begins to be your reality. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the realization dawns. This transformation is not only personal. The whispers from your future self are not meant to guide only you into alignment, but to ripple outward into the collective field of human consciousness. Every time you expand into your highest frequency, you contribute to a rising tide that lifts more than just your own life. Scientists like Rupert Sheldrake have proposed the idea of a morphic field, a shared informational field that makes it easier for others to adopt behaviors, ideas, or capacities once someone has already embodied them. Spiritual traditions express the same truth in different language, that one person's awakening becomes a lamp, lighting the path for countless others. Your future self understands this intimately. They live in a reality where every personal act of remembrance strengthens the global field of remembrance. History offers echoes of such collective shifts. The Renaissance was not the brilliance of a single genius, but a surge of visionaries sparking one another into new realms of art, science, and philosophy. The Great Awakenings in America were not the result of one preacher's words, but waves of spiritual fervor that spread like fire across communities. Again and again, we see that when enough individuals step into higher alignment, cultures change, paradigms collapse, civilizations turn toward new destinies. This is why your transformation matters more than you realize. When you choose coherence over contradiction, love over fear, truth over silence, you're not only shaping your own timeline, you're contributing to the evolution of humanity. Your frequency becomes part of the collective frequency. The clearer you become, the easier it is for others to access clarity. The more love you embody, the more natural love feels in the wider world. And with this recognition comes compassion. True spiritual maturity is not about escaping humanity or transcending it. It is about embracing it fully, with tenderness and patience. Your future self does not judge those still stumbling through their own illusions. They understand that everyone awakens in their own time. They hold space with infinite patience, knowing that every soul's journey is part of the larger symphony of remembrance. This compassion extends backward to you in this present moment. Your future self looks upon you not with criticism, but with profound love. They see the perfection of your timing, the beauty of your struggle, the sacredness of every step. They remember your doubts and fears not as failures, but as necessary ingredients in the recipe of awakening. They know what you cannot yet see, that your challenges have already been woven into the fabric of your becoming. And so, as you begin to embody more of this frequency, time itself begins to loosen its grip. You start to glimpse the truth your future self already lives by. That the past, present, and future are not three separate corridors, but one vast chamber of possibility. In this chamber, the eternal now, you can touch the resonance of every version of yourself, and by choosing to embody one frequency, you draw it into form. What you do for yourself, you do for the whole. Every act of remembrance is a contribution to the collective shift, and in this way, awakening becomes both the most intimate and the most universal act you will ever undertake. Your future self is not a fantasy shimmering on the horizon. They are a fixed point in the quantum field, what physicists might call a collapsed wave function. Out of the infinite ocean of possibilities, this version of you has already crystallized, and like a lighthouse on a distant shore, they emit a signal, a gravitational pull, guiding you toward them. Every intuitive nudge, every sudden knowing, every synchronicity is one of their beams of light breaking through the fog of time. But here is where many falter. They believe that following this signal will lead to ease, comfort, and effortless ascent. Yet your future self is not guiding you toward your comfort. They are guiding you toward your highest evolution. Sometimes that means walking through fear, surrendering attachments, and dismantling identities you thought were permanent. It can feel like loss, when in truth it is liberation. They remember this part of the journey vividly, the moments when they too felt stripped bare. But they also remember the beauty on the other side. Mystics call this process the dark night of the soul. Alchemists saw it as dissolution, the breaking apart of false structures before gold could emerge. In myth, it is the hero's descent into the underworld before their return transformed. Your future self has endured this death and resurrection, and they want you to know it is not destruction, it is preparation. What feels like unraveling is the false self falling away, so the true self may breathe. This dissolution unfolds in cycles. Each time you choose intuition over fear, a layer of limitation dissolves. Each time you act from love instead of contraction, another veil lifts. Slowly, you reveal what has always been there, the self beyond conditioning, radiant and unbound. Your future self is not someone new. You do not need to build them. They are who you already are when all that is false has been shed. And here is the profound realization: this awakening is not yours alone. As you rise into coherence, you ripple into the collective field. Every act of trust, every moment of alignment cuts a path through the dense jungle of human conditioning. Those who come after you walk more easily because of the way you cleared. Your transformation becomes a gift to countless others. You join a web of awakened beings across time and space, each one amplifying the field of possibility for all. This is why compassion is the heartbeat of your future self. They know awakening is not a race, but a remembrance. They hold no judgment for those still lost in forgetfulness, for they remember their own. Instead, they extend love, patience, and infinite acceptance toward others and toward you, because they see what you cannot yet see, that every twist and turn of your path has been necessary. Every moment of delay was preparation. Every perceived mistake was redirection. And as you deepen into this frequency, even your perception of time itself begins to shift. You start to sense what your future self already knows, that past, present, and future are all braided together in the eternal now. From this vantage, your dreams are not out there, waiting. They are here, alive, waiting for you to tune into their frequency. You are not striving forward. You are uncovering what has always been. The more you embody this perspective, the less you cling to control. You begin to trust the intelligence of life, to surrender the how while holding clear the why. You discover that the universe is infinitely more creative than your limited imagination. When you release rigid expectations, miracles slip in through the cracks. Your future self lives this truth daily. They clarify what they wish to embody, why it matters, and then allow the universe to surprise them with the how. And here is the final revelation. The more you step into the energy of your future self, the more the concept of future dissolves. You realize that they were never distant. They were always here, folded into the infinite present. What you called your future self is simply the unconditioned you, the timeless you, the you who remembers. So the question remains, will you answer the call? Will you stop waiting for proof and become the proof? Will you trust the whisper that has followed you through every synchronicity, every shiver of recognition? Your future self already knows your answer. They stand with infinite love, unwavering, a lighthouse that never dims. All that remains is for you to step into alignment and walk home to who you truly are.